Yes, I was one of the lucky ones that was given access to Civ 7's beta build in order to give you a first look at the game. With the full release of Sid Meier's Civilizations 7 in less than a month on February 11th, there's a lot to cover. So let's jump right in and let me show you everything I've learned about Civ 7 with my own footage and experience with the game so far. This will be an expansive video starting from the beginning, including information from the developer diaries, but with direct examples from my game. I'll also be including new small details that I haven't seen discussed so far. So if you're just now tuning into Civ 7 coverage, you can get up to date here. If you've been following it obsessively since the original game announcement, I still have lots of new stuff for you. As always, feel free to use the chapters down below or skip ahead to this time code if you're already familiar with the biggest changes to Civilization 7 and just want to jump in to see the in-game footage. As with many things that are new, I like providing information and letting you decide what you think about that information. This video is not sponsored, but I'm happy to have been included in the preview program from 2K and Firaxis, providing me early access to the game. My personal opinions and review will be saved for a later video, so subscribe so you don't miss that. There's some big changes for Civ 7, making transformational moves defining it from previous Civilization titles. The biggest change in Civ 7 is the introduction to the new age system. Each Civ has been placed into one of three broader ages: the Antiquity Age, the Exploration Age, and the Modern Age. The Antiquity Age is when the agricultural societies began to cluster into urban centers, forming the foundations of civilizations, as well as the wars and conquests with neighbors over control of their homelands and the crisis that led to some of their collapse. The Exploration Age begins around the Middle Ages, when civilizations began to look outward, beyond their starting continent, in order to find goods and riches to bring back to their homelands, springing a renaissance of new ideas and values in a world of colonization. And lastly, the Modern Age dawns when the world began to industrialize, spawning rapid advancement in technologies, solving some issues, but also creating more global conflicts that culminated in the splitting of the atom. There's a couple of choices of civilizations that will feel similar to previous Civ games, allowing you to play quote-unquote the same civilization through all three ages, but from different dynasties for each age. For example, you can play as the Han Dynasty in Antiquity, the Ming Dynasty in Exploration, and finally the Qing Dynasty in the Modern Age, all three major chapters of what we think of as China today. But if you look through history, most civilizations have not actually stood the test of time in this way. For instance, the Roman Empire famously collapsed at the end of Antiquity, but the cities and the people didn't just disappear. They separated, fought, reorganized, and formed new civilizations as time went on, including the Normans, who went on to conquer their own lands, to rise and then fall again to other civilizations, like the Franks, who transitioned into the French Empire. With civilizations specific to certain ages, this allows the developers to get very specific with the civilizations that they pick. We've already shown that you can highlight how a civilization has changed through time. For instance, modern-day India, with its many dynasties having different game bonuses to highlight different priorities during different periods of time. But also, you can choose to have a civilization that may not have had as much as a global impact on all of history, but was impactful to a smaller part of the world for a short period of time. Even though you'll be evolving civilizations throughout the game, it's often very important in video games to keep certain consistencies throughout the game. The most important is the avatar, the leader you chose to be, as well as the faces of the neighbors you form relationships with, whether they be attachments or resentments throughout the game. So if you're friendly with your neighbor Hatshepsut because of your amazing cultural exchanges, and you hate your neighbor Xerxes because he stole your city, these leaders and your memories of each other will follow you into the next age. That does create interesting situations, of course, because if instead of eating poisonous figs, your immortal Augustus leads the crumbling Roman Empire into a new day, transitioning from emperor to king of the Normans, and then pushes that kingdom until you're emperor again, but under the French Empire. It's different for sure, yes, but it's Civ. Last week I was Teddy Roosevelt building the pyramids in 400 BC on the continent of Antarctica. But of course, that means you'll have certain games where you want to play as Benjamin Franklin, who leads America, which is a modern era Civ. So if you're gonna play starting in the Antiquity, then the game will suggest that you start with ancient Greece. This might feel weird at first, but remember, Benjamin Franklin was a political philosopher and founding father to one of the biggest democracies in the world, and took a lot of inspirations from the philosophers and the political structure of ancient Greece. So if Benjamin Franklin happened to be an immortal being that's been alive since the beginning of time, it's a pretty good bet you could find him in ancient Greece. Between this and Civilization 7, branching out from just having leaders that were political heads of states to other types of leaders, whether they're military officers and diplomats, writers and philosophers, cultural and religious leaders, to scholars and travelers, all of which influenced not only the civilization that they were from, but their neighboring civilizations and civilizations to come. Because of this, some of these transitions may feel more natural than immediately assumed, but maybe I can jump into an actual game here from the very beginning and help you decide on that for yourself. You'll notice quite immediately as soon as we load up a game here that because Civilization focuses on these distinct separate ages, we actually have quite a few unique units and buildings here, which I can't wait to just jump into. Here we are, turn 1 on the very first spawn that I rolled. I'm going to go ahead. There's a couple of options here to turn on the yield icons because I know you guys are going to want to see this. One of the first things that you'll notice is there's quite a bit differences with how yields are spread out through tiles. No longer are desert tiles worthless. Desert tiles actually give production. Grassland give food, as well as there's a bunch of different types of terrain types that are new. We have grassland, plains, desert, tropical, and tundra, but each biome has various regions, including floodplains, forest, marsh, savanna, woodlands, watering holes, sagebrush steppe, oasis, rainforest, mangrove swamp, taiga, tundra bog, and aquatic, as of course, flat, rough river, mountains, coasts, and ocean tiles. As the step says, terrain and biomes provide some natural yields, but the majority of your yields will be coming from tile improvements boosted by the technologies that you research. That generally means that you won't be rolling for perfect spawns and getting 2 food to production tiles all the time anymore. Instead, you'll be able to make do with whatever you roll pretty much every time. You do still want to settle on freshwater. The freshwater bonus does not give housing because there is no housing in Civ 7. What it does, it gives you a happiness bonus. Our first unit here, the Founder, is your first settler that is in charge of founding your capital city. Founders will found capitals. Settlers later on will found towns. Because we spawned on a river with a few resources nearby, I'm just going to go ahead and settle in place. You can see the capital has a fantastic palace and looks amazing. I can click right over here to bring up the city details, and you can see very quickly that the palace provides 5 food, 5 production, and 5 happiness. And Rome gets +1 culture on every district in the capital. You notice we didn't spawn with a unit. The game actually gives us agency to make the decision ourselves. It actually lowers the cost of your first unit to 1 production, so you actually can build a warrior or a scout for your particular playstyle. Scouts are much better than they were in Civ 6 and Civ 5. The first thing great about them is that they just ignore vegetation straight up. You don't need a promotion to be able to get that bonus. They can just run straight through the trees because, of course, it's like one guy and his dog. Movement's been changed slightly in Civ 7. Instead of rough terrain costing more movement points, what it does, it just completely ends all your movement. So if you like walk into a water tile, you will end your movement, but scouts can at least walk into vegetation without losing their movement. You can see one of our first choices now is to pick a technology, and you'll notice quite immediately that the tech tree does branch out, but it is very short in terms of what we're used to, because the tech trees are all unique in each era, meaning that if you have enough science, you can make it to the end of the tech tree and start hitting future era. This will actually give you bonuses, so it is still useful to focus in on science. You can see here we're getting extra wildcard attribute points if you hit the future tech, as well as advancing the era even faster. So you can beeline science to push the era, or you can actually double back and focus on these masteries, which will actually give you extra bonuses to certain technologies. For instance, writing is where you get the basic technology building, the library, which gives you science. But if you unlock the mastery for writing, you can get a free codex as well as science on these buildings. In terms of our first technology, I immediately see that we have an ivory tile here. So having access to animal husbandry will help us with the improvements we want to make in the game. Note, tile improvements are available from the very start of the game. You can still make camps before researching animal husbandry, but finishing animal husbandry will give you +1 production on those camps, as well as access to a building called a saw pit, which gives you additional production on those camps. You notice even though it's turn 2, our yields are significantly higher than they would be in, say, a Civ 6 game. It seems that even though our capital is not producing any science, you just have a baseline of 10 science and 10 culture per turn, as well as 5 gold per turn and 10 influence points per turn. This is the much improved version of diplomatic favor from Civ 6 and is way more influential in the game. But the capital of Roma, of course, is working 5 food, 5 production, and 1 culture with 5 happiness. That is, of course, just the yields on the city center tile, but to be clear, to not include the yields of unimproved tiles in our city borders. You can see scouts and warriors are the same amount of production costs. It is 30 production, but I'm going to go ahead and build a warrior quickly. I'll send my scout out just a little bit further into these plains here onto this oasis tile, and it looks like we actually have our first goodie hut. There are several different types of goodie huts now. This one is called a luxurious encampment. You'll notice immediately iron is already revealed. There's no more iron griefing from unlocking strategic resources in your games. Each era has different strategic resources, so think about the Antiquity Age having access to iron and horses immediately. I'm sure the Exploration Age will introduce niter, and the Modern Age will probably be introducing coal as well as oil. You can see here we've actually grown to 2 pop already. You'll notice my city is still working 5 food, 5 production, 1 culture, even though it is at 2 population, because how cities work tiles has been completely reworked in Civ 7. Gone are the days of managing population and exactly which tiles that your cities are working, switching back and forth between food or production tiles. And also gone are builders and workers. No longer are you running these units around, improving single tiles. They have done this to reduce micromanagement. And if you take a look at anyone's Civ 6's Hall of Fame, you know the most popular unit is always the builder, just because you got to build so many of them. Now things have been simplified. Every time you grow a population, you will now assign that population to a different tile to work. For instance, we can go ahead and place the population on top of this ivory tile, giving our city 1 food, 1 culture, 1 happiness, as well as access to an ivory resource. That immediately builds the camp on this tile, as well as culture bombs all surrounding tiles. We now have 6 food, 5 production, 2 culture, and 6 happiness, because we are working these 2 tiles. Now, the goodie huts in Civ 7 are actually so great. Dare I call them Grady huts? I'm so sorry about that one. This brings up the new goodie hut pop-up, which is way more detailed than they used to be and actually introduces a little bit of a narrative element. You can see here a party of noblemen has had a successful hunt. They instruct their servants to leave what they cannot carry, but there's no shortage of hungry mouths back home. So these noblemen have had a hunt and hunted too much food. So what we can do is we can take the excess game away from them, giving instant food and instant gold to our capital. Or we decide to not risk the conflict and you get actually a happiness bonus. But a happiness is a yield that is new to Civilization 6 players, but if you've played Civilization 5, it's actually very similar, but nowhere near as punishing as it was in Civ 5. There is, of course, local happiness, and happiness is required in each of your cities in order to upkeep your cities. The more you expand and build, the more happiness is required from your cities. And if your happiness ever goes negative, you get a penalty to your yields. But it's proportional. If you're only a little bit unhappy, you get a little bit of a penalty. But if it's very big, then it's very big. There's also happiness as a global resource. This is just the sum total of all of your excess happiness throughout your entire empire. Global happiness is what brings you to what is called a celebration. And we'll talk about celebrations in a little bit, but basically, if I grab the happiness, we'll come closer to a celebration. Right now, I just want the food and the gold because early food is really good, and I want to get to that 3rd population. So I'm just gonna grab the gold and the food and immediately get to 3 population, and then immediately get the chance to grow our city. I'm gonna go ahead and put my farm right here because it's going to culture bomb towards the silver tile and generate a nice, lovely farm here. We found our very first neighbor. This is actually a independent power. Now, independent powers are basically if you took Barbarians and you took city-states and you mix them all together. There there are no beginning barbarians in the start of the game, and there's no beginning city-states. It is just independent powers. This specific independent power is actually hostile, meaning that they are aggressive and they will attack you just like a barbarian camp would. And my favorite thing about these scouts is some of their special abilities. You can use a lookout, which puts you on a little tower and you stay there, but it increases your vision and is actually useful for having lookouts for enemies approaching your land or independent powers doing so. But also there's a ability here called Search, which gives you +1 sight range for 1 turn, but you also will reveal all discoveries within twice of that range, giving me vision further out, but also discovering here's a campfire, which is a goody hut. Here is another luxurious encampment for another goody hut, and here is a tent camp for another goody hut. But I want to grab those before other civs do. You can see we have a first unit here, the warrior, who actually have swords and shields here, so a little bit more similar to a swordsman, but these are considered our tier 1 infantry unit. Now let's talk about districting, because Civ 6 introduced districting and it was a very, very good mechanic in the game. It was a puzzle, it was fun to figure out, but at the end of the day, it was kind of the same every game. Commercial hubs went on rivers, campuses and holy sites went by mountains, theater squares went by your wonders, and everything always just looked the same. A campus looked exactly the same in every single civilization, in every single era, in every single game. So now things have been remixed a little bit. Instead of having different districts for different goals, like campuses for science or commercial hubs for gold, the emphasis is put on the buildings inside of the districts as opposed to the district themselves. Because now there's only 2 different types of districts. You have rural districts, which are basically our tile improvements. That in this case, we have a camp and we have a farm. And then you have urban districts. Each urban district has 2 building slots and you can put any buildings in them that you want. Our first urban district is our city center here, and then the first building in it is the palace. The second building I can build right now is the granary, and this can go either in the city center right next to the palace, or we can place it on a different tile, creating a new urban district. Granaries provide +1 food, but they also give +1 food on farms, pastures, and plantation. The game automatically gives you the total in a city that you would benefit, not just the +1 food. It tells you right away it's +1 food from the granary and +1 food from this farm. Urban districts have to be built connected to each other, just like rural districts need to be connected to each other. But that will immediately create an urban tile, which unlike rural districts will remove the yields that you place this on top of. So in general, you want to try to put rural districts on high yield tiles and urban districts on low yield tiles, but focus on the yields from the buildings and their adjacencies. Urban districts also culture bomb when the building is finished, allowing you to expand your cities in multiple directions. The hunters have set up a camp in a quiet forest. They complain of the neighbors who encroach on their lands and call the wildlife. Still, they're happy to trade with what they have. So we can immediately grab 20 food and 10 production, or negotiate with the neighbors and grab 45 influence. Influence is actually a very, very powerful currency in this game. I want to grab the influence just to show off the mechanic as much as I can in this game. With animal husbandry, we have unlocked a few things, including the saw pit, giving production on camps, but also slingers, which slingers now have 2 range. You can see here the civics tree is also just the 1 era, but there's actually 2 specific civic trees here. You can see antiquity civics, which are the game's own civics, but also Roman specific civic. Each civ has their own personal civic tree, which unlocks their own unique buildings, as well as other abilities, like having for Rome, you get additional settlement limits, or you gain a free infantry unit in new settlements that you found is a really good one. So focusing on these early is actually very important. I actually like going for discipline here because we also have our own unique great commander who can even found their own cities if they get to 3 promotions. Now here is what they are calling narrative events, but the Senate is in session and voices are raised in conflict. A lone senator speaks out against imperial fiat, while Augustus' supporters seek to drown him out. You can go ahead and listen to the senator, but you're also selecting an option to begin a quest. This quest is to build 3 monuments. Basically, the senator convinced you to actually focus on culture. Or you can tell the senator that the only strength and loyalty of an army matters, and you get a quest to have a commander with 3 promotions. Or you can say, screw politics and gain 50 gold. For this, I'm going to take the listen to the senator quest. But that pulls up the journal here. There's actually this really convenient journal, which will help you track what you need to be doing, especially when it comes to the victory conditions, or what we call legacy paths, which are basically the mini victory conditions in every age, which you can find in the age progression panel. No longer are you trying to just win a victory type at the very end of the game, whether it's a science victory or a culture victory or whatnot, but you are trying to win a victory type or as many victory types as possible in each of the eras. If, for instance, you wanted to go for a culture victory, you can hit track progress and it will pull up all the objectives right here in your journal. But to see the full details, you have an objective to build a wonder. The first step is just building a single wonder. And once you complete that quest, you'll get the next quest. Military is a very interesting one. And of course, as Rome, we're going to go ahead and track this one. This is the military advisor telling us things that we need to do. But the first thing we need to do is to study the discipline civic. We've already queued that up, so we're already on the way. But overall, the goal of a military legacy path is to have as many cities as possible by the time the era finishes. You can see here, it says have 12 towns or cities in your empire, but conquered settlements will count as 2. Remember, we have a settlement limit, so that means conquering cities can actually help you more than settling your own. You can see you can get extra bonuses for partially completing a legacy path. If you get all the way to finishing, you get a golden age, which is very, very useful. But if you don't even get to the first one, you will go into a dark age. In Civ 6, where you had era score thresholds and you had to do these really arbitrary things to get historic moments and hit era score by a X turn, or how you would want to like delay era score sometimes if you were scoring too many things. Now, Dark Age, Golden Ages, Normal Ages, they're all tied into directly how far you got in each of the legacy paths and is separated. So you can have a military Golden Age, but also a cultural Dark Age at the same time. In terms of science, the goal here is to get 10 codex. Codex are basically a great work that gives science. But you can see here, the first objective is just to research writing, as well as there's the economic legacy path, which is all about getting as many resources in your cities as possible. Assign 20 resources to all of your settlements. Completing these legacy paths not only give you golden ages, but give you direct bonuses into the next era. So finishing as many of them as possible is ideal. But the more you finish and the more the other players finish, the faster the era progresses. So you will have to prioritize your objectives. After animal husbandry, I'm going to go ahead and go and unlock masonry, specifically because I want to get access to the monument, which gives culture as well as influence, and also gives production on mines and quarries. Also, every time you complete a civic, you get the choice to change policies in your government. The first thing we need to do is actually pick the government itself. You can see we have 3 different choices of antiquity governments that all have different bonuses during celebrations. Classic Republic gives you culture and production towards wonders. Despotism gives you science, but also production towards infantry. And then there's oligarchy, which gives you 20% food and 30% production towards buildings. I'm going to go ahead and pick oligarchy just because early food and early production feels really good for me. You can see every time we reach a celebration, we get the 20% food and 30% production towards building buildings. How you trigger celebrations is by global happiness. You can see here we have 6 per turn global happiness. The more happiness you have, the more celebrations you get, the more of your government boost that you'll be getting, as well as every time you hit a celebration, you'll get access to another policy card. So I can have to pick between charismatic leader, giving me culture on my palace, or tool making, giving me production and science. I already have good culture. I want more science and production. I'm gonna go ahead and select the science and production. Here's the first navigable river we found. This is very new to Civ 7 and is a crowd favorite. Also, scouts can embark before sailing, which is fun. So you see Goody Hut's giving you a choice between 2 different abilities. It actually has quite a bit of depth to it. I have a choice here between food or gold. You could use the gold to buy yourself a unit, but I'm going to choose to take the food here because it'll immediately grow my population, giving me another tile to work, speeding up the production of our granary, increasing the snowball of our food growth, allowing us to build settlers sooner, etc., etc. It appears the depth in the early game has less to do with the exact population management and builders, and more about how your decisions will compound with each other for your specific priorities each game. And it looks like we met Confucius of China. And you can see here, this is our very first chance to spend any type of influence. We have a first meet. We can give them a neutral meeting for 0 influence, or we can spend 20 influence to give a positive relationship or a negative one. I'm gonna go ahead and decide to give him a positive one. It reveals the capital of either leader if nearby, because I want to know where his capital is. I do not see it on the map, so I guess he's not close. This scout's grabbing another goody hut. We can immediately grab extra culture here, or we can tear down the statue for gold. I'll grab the culture and get 4 turns off of discipline immediately. Now that we've hit 5 population, we're actually allowed to expand outside of just our one city and build a settler to found more towns. How much we expand is up to us, but new to Civ 7 is a settlement cap, which starts at 3 cities, but is expanded over time. Now, the settlement cap is a soft limit. If you settle over 3 cities, you're fine. What happens is that you just get -5 happiness in all settlements per settlement over the limit to a maximum of 35 happiness. So you can settle or conquer over your settlement limit, but you'll have to deal with a happiness penalty, reducing your global happiness and the amount of celebrations you hit, as well as how many policy cards you can unlock in your government. If any of your cities hit negative local happiness, then you'll also have to deal with reduced yields as well as potential uprisings where your local population will pillage your own districts. So you can see now there's some depth to the decision whether or not you're going to go for a tall build with less cities and focusing on that happiness, or go for a wider build focusing on more cities and less happiness. It's not like Civ 5 where the meta was always tall and just build 4 cities, and it's not like Civ 6 where the meta was go as many cities as physically possible, because now there's a little bit of nuance and flexibility in the builds. Keeping to your settlement limit will maximize your happiness and your efficiency per city, as well as the amount of social policy cards you can run, but going wide and having more cities will allow you to complete more of your legacy path objectives and have more starting settlements for the next era. As long as you focus on producing extra happiness to reduce the worst of the debuffs of passing your settlement limit, you can have a very strong game. But every time you settle a city, you do have to make sure that city is worth settling. Here's discipline. I'm gonna go ahead. There's actually a survey promotion. I actually love this promotion, giving scouts extra movement and sight. I have 2 scouts. This could actually be very useful. Now that we have discipline unlocked, I'm gonna go ahead and go towards mysticism. Mysticism unlocks Pantheons. Oh, we found an independent power. You can see that they're just a unit fortified on a tile, but you can interact with them. And this one is also hostile, meaning that I should be keeping my scout away from them. But you can see when you use our influence here to befriend this independent power, which will make it so that they stop attacking us, but also will eventually become a city-state. You can see by the icon that if Champa becomes a city-state, it will be a cultural city-state, which you can decide is useful for your strategy. Or you can just kill these independent powers, giving you an instant boost, either production, science, culture, or gold. We've unlocked masonry, so we have unlocked our ancient walls and monuments, as well as +1 production towards mines. So you can see here our mine has instantly gotten another +1 production. I'm gonna build a quick warrior so I have some more units back home, but also use this goody hut to speed up the production of that warrior, which will give me escorts to be able to defend my settler. Now, settlers are civilian units, and civilian units now have a combat strength modifier. It's very low, but that does mean they can defend themselves from maybe a single attack. You'll still want to defend them with more units, but if they are attacked by an enemy, they can be killed. And I mean full kill. They're not captured like in previous Civ games. They're actually just killed. There's no more settler sniping, especially with scouts. And scouts themselves are actually civilian units as well, so they can't even attack. But also this means the AI won't yell at you for having military units by their borders when it's just like 2 scouts. Now that our settler has found a nice freshwater tile close to a bunch of resources, I will settle our first town. Now, towns are something that I've wanted in a Civ game for a very long time. In Civ 6, the very first few cities you settle has always been incredibly important, where every tile you work, every building you build, everything you do is incredibly, incredibly important to the entire snowball of the game. But as the game goes on, each new settlement becomes less and less important to your overall empire, and you kind of just end up with 30 plus cities with 30 different production queues, all demanding attention like every single turn, where these decisions didn't always matter and kind of just turned the late game into a slog. There's also been a bunch of times in the late game where I found some uranium that was outside of my borders, so I needed to go settle one last city just to grab that uranium. But all I really wanted was just a little bit of an outpost to improve a single tile to get access to a strategic resource for the final endgame. And now Fraxis has actually done that. We now have 2 different tiers of settlements. cities that work their own tiles for their own population and have their own production queues, and towns that don't have production queues but are generally used to boost your cities. And see, as soon as we settle a town, we immediately get a road built connecting to the closest city. That's not just a Rome thing, that's every civ in the game. Every town will accumulate its own yields, including food so that it can grow its population, create rural districts, and gather resources for your empire. But any production that the city would be making is actually just going to be converted directly into gold per turn. Our first rural district is going to be this iron mine, giving the town another 3 production, which is converted directly into another 3 gold per turn, and provide us a copy of iron. As the city grows population, it will be able to work more rural districts, but if you want to get any urban districts in the town, you need to buy that with gold. But now I can formally talk about our great commanders, which are a souped up version of great generals from previous Civ games. In order to reduce micro in Civ 6, where you had to click every single unit and move them all one individually at a time, we now have access to these army commanders, which will increase the movement, functionality, and effectiveness of your military units. Military units don't level up anymore. They've just consolidated promotions to the army commanders themselves. You can see here there's a bunch of different trees. Some of these focus on defense, some are on offense, some are on logistics and movement, while others are all about just boosting cities in peacetime. But what is the most fun about them is that you can actually use them to group and stack units together. So now I have an army commander with 2 warriors on it that can all move together. And they can go out together exploring and also fighting some independent powers. Our scout here has found a friendly independent power, Babylon. This is just a scientific city-state, and I can actually spend my influence to befriend them. This will immediately add a progression bar where you can see how quickly they turn into a city-state. If it becomes a city-state, it'll become my suzerain, and then I can maybe get a bonus from them. It immediately puts me to 30 out of 60 influence, giving me 2 per turn, and you can spend more influence to speed this up. I've also met another civ. Egypt has Shepset. I'm going to try to spend the influence to find the capital as well. And again, it didn't show me where her capital is. Oh, bringing our scout this direction actually let us meet another civ. So we have Ashoka, who leads the Mauryan Indian dynasty. He's trying to spend influence again to find one of these civs. And there he is. Now we finally know. He's up here spawning in the tundra, which of course doesn't have bad yields. We've unlocked mysticism, which will unlock altars and pantheons for us later. And we can see we have another hostile city-state over here. This is one that I'll probably want to kill. They're going to be spawning a bunch of hostile boats all on this coast, so I want to deal with them. And I'm going to start researching my Roman civics because they're just really good here. This will unlock specific Roman traditions, which are basically policy cards that are unlocked in your unique Civ's civic tree. And those are very good for legions later on. We finally hit our first We Love the King Day, our first celebration. I can ask for food or production towards buildings, so I'm going to ask for food here. This will just get both of my cities to grow. My city isn't working on a building right now, it's working on a settler, and this town doesn't have a production queue, so I think the food here is just the way to go. Because we got a celebration, we got an extra policy slot, keep in survey and run tool making again for the production and science, and we now have Pantheons. Pantheons are completely revamped in Civ 7. You'll notice that most of them actually require altars. So we have City Patron Goddess, which gives influence. We have Earth Goddess, which gives happiness, adjacency for mountains and natural wonders. Oh, that sounds amazing. I'm going to use that sometime. Fertility Rights gives growth rate in all cities with an altar, but that looks like it's taken. It's interesting that they allow us to see which Pantheons were there but are taken instead of just removing them from the list now. Some Pantheons, like God of Healing, do not require an altar, but Sacred Waters is a good one. It gives happiness for adjacency to coast, lakes, and navigable river tiles. This is an interesting time to talk about adjacencies because adjacencies, of course, are no longer on districts. You're not building a campus or a theater square with inherent adjacencies. You're just building a blank urban district. And then the buildings inside of them have adjacencies. The granary is a building that does not have an adjacency, but for instance, the Sacred Waters Pantheon gives a happiness adjacency to altars if adjacent to coast, lakes, or navigable river. So for instance, if I put an altar on this tile adjacent to 3 coast tiles, the altar will then have an additional +3 happiness. Looking at these, I really like God of the Sun. 1 culture, food, gold, happiness, production, and science on an altar just feels really good if you're going to build an altar in a city. But you can see I'm going to attack this scout with my melee unit, and that gives experience to the commander. This +4 experience is going to the commander, not to the unit itself. Technology-wise, I'm going to go ahead and go to irrigation. You'll notice that bronze working is actually right here. Now, there are 3 tiers of infantry units in the Antiquity era. The first one is our warriors, unlocked at the start of the game, who have 20 combat strength. Once you unlock bronze working, you can upgrade these warriors, usually into spearmen, who have 25 combat strength. And once you get all the way up to iron working, you can unlock the phalanx, who have 30 combat strength. Now, our Legion are the 2-tier replacement for the Spearmen, meaning that Rome doesn't get Spearmen, they just get Legion, who have 25 combat strength, but get additional combat strength for every Roman tradition you have slotted in. But even though Legions start as tier 2 infantry units, once you get to military training, instead of unlocking the Phalanx, you get a tier 3 Legion, meaning you just can upgrade into an even stronger version of the Legion with 30 combat strength, but you keep the Legion's special abilities as well as their unique style for the rest of the era. Meaning, as soon as you unlock a unique unit in a game, it is available and relevant for the rest of the era. No longer are you going to unlock Legions, and then by the time you actually march them to another city, they get obsoleted, like in Civ 6. Now you can have Legions that are reliant and available for like 100 turns. Ooh, Confucius is getting double shot from galleys. Galleys have a range attack now, and they can shoot units, which is concerning. Now that we have our Pantheon and altars are just really, really good, I actually just want to build this immediately. You can see it actually tells you what yields you'll be getting if you place a certain building. I'm going to go ahead and click on the monument to make this a little more easier to see. But our monument gives culture, +2 culture and +1 influence. But it also gets +1 culture if there's a mountain nearby, or if there's a natural wonder nearby, or if you have a adjacent wonder nearby. So monuments will be getting additional culture if you build wonders or you put it next to a mountain. Like, the building itself is what gets the adjacency. That being said, I want to build this altar ASAP. I also get culture on districts in the capital. So there is a option. Instead of putting this in the same urban district as I had before, is I could put it in a different one and get the +1 culture there. So even though I get the science and culture from putting the altar here, I'm actually going to put the altar over here. Not only does that give me +1 culture from having another district because I'm Rome, but it actually allows me to put the monument here next to the granary, which gives a +1 science adjacency. When you're settling your cities, I've been finding it's useful for, 1, to settle on fresh water so you get bonus happiness, but also to settle where you can to get as many resources as possible. Settling min distance is no longer seeming like the obvious choice, given that you have a settlement cap, and getting all the way to a 3rd ring resource is actually very easy with the new culture bomb mechanic. So settling like within 3 tiles of a bunch of resources is actually really useful. Ooh, we found our first natural wonder, the Uluru, coming back. Looks like it gives happiness and culture on desert terrain in this settlement if you settle it. Wonders are now very, very good. I had another game where I settled the redwoods and it gave like science on all of my trees, which was really nice. Oh, you can see my commander got attacked here. You want to make sure your commander stays safe. These units are packed, so they weren't quite ready to be attacked here. But go ahead, deploy. I do want to make sure that he's safe because you don't want your commanders to die. I'm actually going to move 1 tile further away from this desert and settle next to this lake. And then use my other warrior to kill. You can see here, we just got our first promotion on our commander, and probably one of the most useful immediate promotions is this initiative promotion. Units can move after unpacking for the commander. Settle another city here. I'm also going to go ahead and grab a resource right away. By clicking on our resources tab, I can finally show you the 3 different types of resources in this game. There are city resources, bonus resources, and empire resources. City bonuses give a major bonus to cities, but it has to be equipped in a city, cannot be equipped in a town. Bonus resources are smaller bonuses, but they can go into towns as well as cities. And empire resources do not need to be equipped to a city because they apply to your entire empire. Specifically, I want to point out iron and horses here because they are what we called strategic resources in Civ 6. No longer are you required to have iron to build swords and legions in Civ 7. Instead, having access to these resources just give you additional combat strength on your infantry units. Resources do stack, so the more iron an empire has, the stronger your infantry units, but you'll be able to build these infantry units regardless of whether or not you actually have access to iron. No longer are you going to open up a game of Civ and then try to legion rush your neighbor just to find out you don't have iron anywhere nearby and you can't even build a single legion. Now you'll be guaranteed to always have access to your legions, but you will have some games where your legions are stronger than others. Emissaries from the Babylon have arrived and pronounced the Roman Empire deserves all the glory and respect. Fantastic. Giving you 25 science right now. In order to get your units to heal, all you have to do is skip your turn or come here to hit the heal. This will set up a little camp. And you can see the guys licking their wounds. It's amazing. And you can see the units will start healing. They'll heal faster if they're in their cities, of course. But healing right there is fine too. Oh, fantastic. This river just flooded, giving an additional production and food on these tiles. So getting fishing boats over there will be nice. This also unlocks our Temple of Jupiter. This is one of our unique buildings. And I'm going to immediately go for Civis Romanus. I can start using the gold that we're accumulating. Remember, we can buy buildings for cheap in our Roman towns. And getting a granary in the city will be nice for getting a boost to its food yield. And I'll go ahead and put that right here, getting another urban district down. And we can grow a town. Grab this salt here. Salt gives production towards training units, which will be really nice here in a second. Now that we have irrigation unlocked, this actually gives an increase to our settlement limit, meaning we can get another city here soon, as soon as this brickyard is finished. Uh-oh, my camp just got attacked. Everyone deploy. They're ready for this fight. And also, it looks like Babylon has now become a city-state. They are no longer just a unit that's fortified on a tile. They're actually a city now. Babylon is a scientific city-state and gives a bunch of different bonuses to science. And you get to pick one of these bonuses. I'm going to grab the Codex because this is the core of the scientific legacy path. It's a great work that gives +2 science, and this one is sitting in the palace. If you build libraries, you can get rooms for more Codex because you'll want to have 10 of these if you want to finish out the scientific legacy path. And it might actually be nice to get the mastery to discipline here, giving +3 combat strength against independent powers. Because we're fighting those right now, this could be really helpful. Because these boats are here, I can't really push right now. I'm going to pull back all of our units. And you can see here, once you get a town to grow to a certain population threshold, you actually get the choice to pick a town focus. There's a bunch of different focuses for this town. You could just keep it on growth focus as well. But if you switch this to a different focus, any food that this town is connected to will be shared between all cities that are connected via roads. In this case, the capital. So switching off the growth focus will actually help the capital grow and get really big. The city has a few mines, so I could just make this a mining town, which will give it more production on all of our tile improvements, which is mainly converted to more gold per turn. Now, we glanced on it earlier, but there's actually a lot of really cool things you can do with the influence that we're accumulating. Of course, we already saw that you can see where each other's capitals are and have a friendly meeting, but also simple treaties like opening borders, as well as denouncing military presence. So you can actually tell the AI to get their military troops off your borders now, which is really, really funny. This will either commit the offender to peace for 10 turns or declare war right now with massive war readiness penalties, which is actually really funny. But there's also positive and negative things you can do with this influence, like the cultural exchange, which if you can think about cultural alliances or cultural projects, this basically gives a boost to both players' culture, as well as farmers market gives boost to both players' food. You can also impose sanctions, which are going to be negative projects, so where you can hinder someone's actual cultural progress or their growth, or even, of course, denounce them, which is the key to declaring formal wars. Or if you happen to denounce, you can do a reconciliation project to try to mend those relationships. But there's more products in the tech and civic tree as you look around. You can see if you master writing, you can actually gain the ability to steal technology. Or if you research the wheel, you can do military infiltration, which gains all visibility on the target's commanders, which is really, really useful for basically spying on your enemy's military. Code of laws allow you to improve trade relations, giving you additional trade route capacity with a particular civ. Or the mastery citizenship gives you a wonder construction bonus to both of your civilizations. Keep an eye out in the tech and civic trees for these. These are very, very powerful abilities. And of course, I want to go ahead and do a cultural exchange. If he accepts, this will give us 4 culture per turn to both of us. So from 23 culture, actually up to 29. I'll also get a boost to our food growth here. which he also accepts. And also these endeavors will improve our relationship over time. I also want to talk about our leader attributes. So not only are you playing a unique civilization with a unique leader, but with each leader, you can actually customize with additional bonuses based off of the type of legacy paths you are going down. Right now I have a point for our cultural attribute, which will actually give us +1 culture per age on the palace and city walls. You can see these tend to start pretty simple and then branch out, but you can see we have diplomatic, economic, expansionist, militaristic, and scientific leader attributes. These points will be unlocked based on how you're playing, including with the narrative events. And if you keep an eye out, you'll have a lot of fun with these. I'll be ending the video here for now, but please subscribe because I'll be adding a part 2. This product has ballooned a little bit and I'm already posting a week after the preview embargo was released. So I do just want to get this video out there, but I'm very happy with how detailed things have been. Subscribe for part 2, where we talk about legions, combat, how to do a war push, how to deal with the happiness debuffs of going over a settlement cap, and the transition into the exploration age. Thanks for watching to this point in the video. Love you, nerds. Comment down below for the YouTube algorithm, send a like, and I'll see you very soon. Later, nerds.